Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it like it was nothing, like it didn't mean a damn thing. We were sitting at Olive Garden, her phone face down, but still lighting up every few seconds. She smiled when she said it. Calm, casual, like she was talking about the weather. Flirting isn't cheating, she told her friend across the table, but her eyes flicked at me just for a second, waiting to see how I'd take it. I didn't blink, didn't say a word. I just let the silence hang there between us. That kind of silence cuts deeper than yelling ever could. She laughed, brushed her hair back, and took another sip of wine. I remember the sound of her bracelets clinking against the glass. It was the kind of sound that stays with you. I didn't argue. I just nodded once and said, "Cool. Then leaving isn't betrayal." She froze for a second, just long enough for me to see the mask slip. Then she smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. That was the last thing I said that night. The next morning, she was humming in the kitchen like nothing happened, making pancakes, scrolling Amazon on her phone between flips, sunlight spilling across the counter. She acted like everything was fine, like the conversation at Olive Garden never existed. I watched her move around in her robe, pretending, and something inside me clicked off. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. She kissed my cheek before leaving for work, smelling like vanilla and control. Her car door shut, and I just stood there. No rage, no sadness, just a kind of stillness I'd never felt before. By the time she got back that evening, I wasn't there. My Ford F-150 was gone from the driveway. My phone off. My clothes, my watch, my laptop, all missing like I'd been erased. I didn't take everything. I just took what was mine and left everything that belonged to the version of me she thought she knew. She called, then texted, then called again. Nothing. I wasn't hiding. I was watching, from a distance, seeing her story unfold without me in it. The confidence in her posts started to fade. The captions got shorter. The selfies less polished. The light behind her eyes, dimmer. And in that quiet, I realized something she hadn't yet. The moment I stopped reacting, she lost control. That was the night she stopped smiling. The night she learned what silence really sounds like when it flirts back. Because silence doesn't chase. It waits. And it never begs to be understood. A week passed before she found me. Not in person, online. I had changed nothing on my accounts, didn't block her, didn't post. Just disappeared into the static. That's what got to her. The silence. The lack of anything to react to. When she couldn't find me in her notifications, she started to lose her rhythm. People like her need an audience. Without one, they start to unravel. I was living 2 towns over, in a small apartment above a hardware store. No decorations, no photos, just a mattress and a coffee maker from Walmart. It felt clean. Empty, but clean. I'd wake before sunrise, drive down near the coast, and sit in the car watching people start their day. Construction workers, joggers, a guy walking his dog. None of them knew me, and that was the point. Every few days, I'd check her socials. She was still posting dinners with friends, gym selfies, little quotes about independence and growth. But her eyes told a different story. You can't fake that kind of loneliness, especially when it's self-inflicted. I learned through a mutual friend, Daniel, that she'd been seen at a bar with someone from her office. A guy named Blake. They'd been close for months, apparently. That's when it hit me. She hadn't lied when she said flirting wasn't cheating. She'd just been preparing her excuse. Daniel didn't know I already suspected. He talked too much, trying to sound sympathetic. I listened, nodded, and thanked him. But when I hung up, I didn't feel betrayed anymore. I felt calm, because now I had the full picture. That night, I went back through our old messages, not to torture myself, but to see the pattern. The late replies, the fake apologies, the sudden warmth when she wanted something. It wasn't chaos, it was strategy. And I had played my part perfectly, the patient, reliable man. The anchor she used to steady herself while she drifted. She thought my silence was temporary, that I was cooling off, waiting for her to reach out. But she didn't understand what had really changed. I wasn't waiting. I was detaching. One night, around midnight, I saw her go live on Instagram. The camera shook a little, her voice lower than usual. She laughed, but it didn't sound like her. Someone off camera said something, and she turned away fast, cutting the stream short. That's when I knew for sure, whatever she'd been building with Blake wasn't solid. She was already losing her balance. I didn't comment, didn't message, Just watched the replay once, closed my laptop, and sat there in the dark. The silence between us had started as punishment, but now it felt like peace. The proof came quietly, almost by accident. I wasn't looking for it anymore. One night, while grabbing coffee at Starbucks, I ran into Jenna, one of her coworkers. She froze when she saw me, like guilt had weighed, and she was carrying too much of it. She said she'd heard I took some time off, trying to sound casual, but her voice cracked when I didn't respond. I just smiled, nodded, and asked how work was going. She hesitated, then said something that made everything fall into place. Blake's been acting strange lately. Guess secrets don't stay secret for long. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Secrets have a way of revealing themselves when you stop chasing them. I left my coffee half finished and walked out into the cool night air. The city felt different that evening, slower, sharper, like everything had been reset, and I was finally seeing it for what it was. When I got back to the apartment, I sat on the floor and opened my laptop. Not to look at her, but at me, at the man I used to be. I scrolled through old photos, vacations, birthdays, fake smiles. Every shot told the same story. Her in focus, me blurred in the background. Always the shadow beside her spotlight. Then I found the receipts. Not literal ones, though there were plenty. Dinners, she said, were work, Uber rides at midnight, and a Venmo transfer with a heart emoji next to Blake's name. But the real evidence wasn't in the data. It was in the tone of her messages, the detachment, the subtle shift from affection to tolerance. You can't quantify betrayal, but you can feel its shape. I didn't confront her. I didn't need the performance of denial, the fake tears, the blame shifting. Instead, I backed up the files and closed the laptop. The next morning, I deleted every photo, every thread, every trace of her from my phone. Not out of rage, out of control. It was the first clean break of my life. Later that day, I got a message from Daniel. You should see what's going around the office. No details, just that. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked down to the shore and stood there until the sun went down. Somewhere out there, she was spinning a story. I knew it. They always do when the silence gets too loud. But this time, I wasn't part of the narrative. I wasn't defending myself. She used to flirt with attention. Now, she was fighting the void. And the void always wins. 2 weeks later, she finally broke the silence. A message came through late at night, just a single line. Can we talk? I stared at it for a while, not because I was tempted, but because it confirmed everything I already knew. When people lose control, they reach for the last person who made them feel grounded. And that was me once. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off my phone and drove out to a 24-hour diner near the highway. The kind of place where no one asks questions and the coffee tastes like burnt survival. I sat by the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. A couple across from me was arguing in whispers. She was scrolling through her iPhone while he stared at his food. I recognized the look on his face, that quiet ache of realizing someone's body is present, but their heart isn't. Back at my apartment, the messages kept coming, each one a little more desperate, a little less composed. First anger, then guilt, then nostalgia. The stages of regret. By the fourth night, she'd left a voicemail. Her voice cracked halfway through. You just vanished. You don't get to do that. We were supposed to fix things. But I hadn't vanished. I had just stopped being available. There's a difference. I checked social media out of curiosity. Her posts had slowed down. No more dinners, no more perfect lighting. Just silence. Then, one night, a picture appeared. Her sitting on the edge of her bed, eyes swollen, captioned with something vague about learning who's real. The comments were full of sympathy, people writing that she deserved better. They had no idea who she was talking about. Meanwhile, I'd found a new rhythm. Early mornings, long drives, quiet meals. I even started going back to the gym, not to reinvent myself, but to remember what it felt like to take up space. The peace was addictive. Then, out of nowhere, Daniel called again. He said Blake had been fired, something about misuse of company funds. He laughed, said karma was fast this time. I didn't laugh back, because I already knew it wasn't karma. It was precision. Before disappearing, I'd sent an anonymous email to the company's internal audit team. Screenshots, dates, transactions. Not lies, just truth delivered at the right moment. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it to balance the scales. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the city lights flicker. Somewhere across town, her perfect world was cracking, and I wasn't the one holding the hammer. By the time the news about Blake reached her, I was already miles ahead. She didn't know I'd had a hand in it, and she never would. That's the beauty of distance. You can move pieces on the board without ever stepping into the game. It started with small ripples. A mutual friend posted something vague about office drama. Then another hinted that some people's karma arrived with receipts. Within a few days, Blake's social media went dark. His LinkedIn vanished, his profile picture disappeared. And just like that, the man who once thought he'd replaced me became invisible. A few nights later, she posted a quote. "Some lessons hurt, but they save you." The comments were full of sympathy. Her followers didn't see what I saw in that caption, panic disguised as philosophy. She wasn't healing. She was scrambling for control. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her facade collapse was enough. Every move she made, every post, every silence between them told me she was drowning under the weight of her own choices. Daniel texted again. He said she'd been crying at work, that people were whispering. Apparently, the office had started connecting dots, late-night messages, company funds, missing receipts. Blake had left her out to dry, and she was realizing too late that he'd never planned to stay. I didn't reply to Daniel. I didn't need updates. The story was writing itself. Instead, I focused on something new, peace. It's strange how quiet becomes addictive once you stop fearing it. I'd wake up early, make coffee, sit by the window, and let the silence stretch. The kind of silence that used to make me anxious now felt like armor. Then one morning, I saw her name pop up again. This time, not a text, a tag. She'd posted an old photo of us, cropped so only her face showed. Captioned, "Some people change when they lose you." I almost laughed. Because I hadn't changed, I'd just stopped pretending. Later that night, she called again. I let it ring out, then replayed her voicemail. Her tone had shifted. No anger this time. Just exhaustion. She said, "I miss how you made things calm. It's loud without you." That line stayed with me. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed the truth. She never wanted me. She wanted peace. And now that peace was gone, she finally realized where it came from. But I wasn't her peace anymore. I'd become her silence. The silence had lasted almost a month before the real fallout began. It started subtle. A few unfollows, a couple of awkward glances at her office, whispers that never quite stopped when she entered the room. I didn't need to see it to know it was happening. Reputation crumbles the same way trust does, quietly at first, then all at once. A friend from her circle, Amanda, ran into me at Target one afternoon. I was picking up coffee filters and a new lamp for the apartment. She looked surprised to see me, said I looked different. Quieter, stronger. Then, as if it slipped out by accident, she mentioned that my ex wasn't doing great. That people had started to distance themselves. That even her closest friends had stopped defending her. I just nodded, thanked her, and walked away. There was no satisfaction in hearing it. Only confirmation that detachment works faster than revenge. That weekend, I drove past the old house. Not to linger, not to look, just to remind myself that it was real once. Her car was still there, lights on, blinds half closed. I saw her silhouette pacing back and forth, phone in hand. Probably rehearsing explanations no one was asking for. A week later, she finally broke down publicly. Not with words, but with absence. No posts, no stories, no comments. Just digital silence. The same silence she used to weaponize when she wanted to punish me. Funny how it turned on her in the end. Daniel called that same night. He said she'd left her job, that Blake had disappeared completely, and that people were starting to whisper about her mental health. I didn't ask for details. I just told him she'd be fine eventually, because she would. People like her always find a way to rebuild the image, even if it's just made of mirrors. But there was something else in Daniel's voice, pity. The kind people reserve for someone they used to envy. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't just alone. She was seen. The version of her that once charmed everyone was gone. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I just took another sip of coffee, closed the blinds, and let the quiet fill the room again. She had spent years mastering the art of performance. And now, for the first time, the world was watching her without the filter. She wanted attention. Now she had eyes, all of them. And not one pair believed the story anymore. When she finally reached out again, It wasn't through a message or a call. It was through absence. Her accounts went dark, no trace of her anywhere. At first, I thought she was doing it for attention, to reset the narrative. But then Amanda texted me out of nowhere. She's not doing well. Maybe just check in. I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. I'd already checked out months ago. Still, that night, I drove past the old neighborhood again. Her car was there, same spot, but the house was dark. Curtains drawn, no sound, no light. I didn't stop, just slowed down enough to see the shape of the life I used to live. There's something haunting about seeing your past still standing while you've already moved on, like a ghost staring back at itself. A few days later, Daniel mentioned she'd been staying home a lot, that she'd quit the gym, stopped meeting friends. People were starting to avoid her, not because of the scandal anymore, but because she made everyone uncomfortable. There's a silence that isn't peaceful, it's heavy, suffocating. That's where she was now. Meanwhile, my life had become brutally simple. Work, gym, quiet nights. I bought groceries at Walmart every Sunday. Same time, same cart. Routine became its own kind of therapy. The predictability felt good, real. Every time I poured coffee in the morning, I remembered the way she used to hum in the kitchen. That same hum that once made the room feel alive. Now it just reminded me how much noise I'd mistaken for love. Then one morning, I saw her name flash on my phone again. Not a call, a text. Just one sentence. You really don't care anymore, do you? I didn't reply, because caring and returning aren't the same thing. A few minutes later, another message came through. You win. But it wasn't about winning. It never was. I wasn't competing. I was healing. That night, I sat on the balcony, watching the streetlights flicker against the rain. Somewhere across town, she was sitting alone too, maybe staring at the same sky, wondering how the man who once gave her everything could now give her nothing at all. What she never understood was that silence doesn't come from anger. It comes from clarity. And once you find clarity, you don't raise your voice. You disappear. It was almost 3 months before I saw her again. Not intentionally, it just happened. I was at a small cafe downtown, grabbing a late lunch after work. She walked in wearing the same coat I'd bought her last winter, looking smaller somehow, like she'd been shrinking from the inside out. For a moment, she didn't notice me. She ordered a coffee, turned to wait, and then froze. Her eyes met mine, and the room went completely still. There were no words, no anger, no scene. Just a quiet recognition. She looked like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. I could see the panic flicker behind her eyes, that realization that she no longer had power over the moment. I nodded slightly, not out of pity, but acknowledgement. Then I turned back to my coffee. She stood there a few seconds longer, maybe hoping I'd say something, maybe hoping I'd ask. I didn't. Eventually, she took her drink and left. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that sounded like the end of something that had already ended. Later that night, she texted again. You've changed, she wrote. I stared at the message and almost smiled. Because she was right, I had. But not in the way she meant. I hadn't become colder. I'd just stopped giving warmth to places that never held it. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, balance. Not revenge, not satisfaction. Just balance. Over the next few days, she tried again. A few more messages, small ones, like hooks in the water. Do you ever think about us? Can we start over? I read every one of them, but never responded. Because I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires energy, and I wasn't spending any more of mine on her. What struck me most was how quiet she had become. No more public posts, no performances. The same woman who once needed an audience now sat alone in her silence. I realized then that I'd finally done what she never could. I'd learned to be comfortable in the quiet. People think closure comes from conversation, from explanations. It doesn't. It comes from peace. From knowing you don't need to hear, I'm sorry, to move on. That day in the cafe, I didn't say a word. But she heard everything. After that day in the cafe, she disappeared again. Weeks went by, and her absence became just another quiet part of my routine. But silence, I've learned, has layers. Sometimes it means peace. Other times, it means the storm is coming back around. It was a Thursday when it happened. I came home late, rain still dripping from my jacket, and saw a figure sitting by the front steps of my building. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But then she looked up. Her face was pale, eyes tired, hair damp from the weather. She didn't look like the woman who used to dominate every room she entered. She looked small. She said she'd been waiting, that she just wanted to talk. I didn't move closer. I just leaned against the railing and let her speak. Her voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after too many sleepless nights. She said she didn't know how things had gotten this far, that everything had fallen apart after I left. That Blake had lied to her, used her, humiliated her. She said I didn't deserve how she treated me. There it was, the apology, the one I thought I'd wanted once. And yet, hearing it didn't bring relief. Just finality. She said she missed the version of herself she was with me. I almost told her that version never really existed. It was built on the stability I gave her. But I didn't. Some truths only cause more ruin. I told her she should go home. Her voice trembled when she asked if there was still a chance for us. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I told her the truth, not cruelly, just clearly, that I wasn't angry anymore, but I wasn't hers anymore either. She didn't cry. Not right away. She just sat there, eyes wide, realizing that silence wasn't my punishment, it was my boundary. Before she left, she whispered, "I never thought you'd really leave." I didn't answer, because I hadn't left, not physically. I had just stepped into a place she couldn't reach. She walked away slowly, head down, swallowed by the rain. I stayed there until she was gone, the sound of her footsteps fading into the night. That was the moment I knew it was over, not because I wanted it to be, but because I no longer needed it not to be. The next morning felt different. Not lighter, not happier, just still. The kind of stillness that only comes when something heavy has finally fallen away. I brewed coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sunrise over the parking lot. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check messages, didn't scroll through anyone's life but my own. The quiet felt earned. Later that day, I got a message from Daniel. He said she'd been talking about moving. New city, new start, a chance to rebuild. I didn't ask where. Some stories don't need sequels. I just wished her well in silence, and that was enough. Weeks passed. I started seeing someone new. Nothing serious, just dinners, conversations, calm company. There was no pressure, no pretense. Just two people learning how to exist in peace. And it made me realize something I'd missed before. Peace isn't found in someone else. It's built, brick by brick, in the quiet choices you make alone. Then one night, as I was driving home, I stopped at a red light and saw her again. Not in person, on a billboard. An ad for a local event. Her face in the crowd, smiling at something just out of frame. It wasn't new, just old footage recycled for marketing. But it felt symbolic somehow. Her image still out there, frozen in time, while the real version had long moved on. I smiled, not bitterly, just knowingly. I thought about her words that night on my doorstep. "I never thought you'd really leave." She wasn't wrong. I hadn't left in anger. I'd just stopped orbiting her world. I'd reclaimed my gravity. A few days later, I got one last message from her. Short. Simple. "I understand now." No explanation, no emotion. Just acknowledgement. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally did, about myself. I closed my phone, stepped outside, and watched the evening sky turn gold over the city. Somewhere, she was rebuilding. Somewhere, I was finally living. And between those two silences, something like forgiveness existed. Not the kind that brings people back together, but the kind that sets them free. She once said flirting wasn't cheating. I told her leaving wasn't betrayal. And now, years later, we both understood what those words really meant. Leaving wasn't the end. It was the beginning of peace. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.